All right, welcome everyone. This is the March 14th working group for Carpenter in 2024. Let me share my screen. All right, everyone can see my screen. Cool. All right. All right, so project updates. Michael, I can read the update, but if you want to go ahead and say a little blurb about it, that works too. Is he here?
He's not here.
Okay. Okay, so the Cappy provider. Oh, that's what he says on the thing. But he's making good progress on the PSC and contributing the repo, but he's got some COD generation working out. Cool. All right, and then Matt, more metrics have been added to the built-in Datadog integration. Not aware of this built-in Datadog integration. Do you want to talk about it?
I'm not sure who started it, but Datadog has some like a metric integration where they're basically uh, converting all of the or like most of the custom metrics the metrics that Karpenter is providing, including them in their package, and then providing them to users with a very simple to enable integration. So I
Cool.
went and updated these to make them more current with the current supported metrics because I wanted more of them. So.
Great. Yes, I didn't know that they do this. What do people use with those metrics? I haven't really used Datadog.
Yeah, I mean, Datadog can basically it can leverage just like straight open metrics compatible stuff, and so it's just another way to visualize and index your metric data rather than like Prometheus, for example.
Okay, cool. And does this require updating every single time that we have a new metric or
Yes,
any
yes,
new label or any new metric name
but I would
change?
say you're not under any obligation to do that as maintainers.
Yeah, good to know. Cool.
Mhm.
All right. So we've had some project updates ourselves that I didn't get a chance to add in here. Manuel or Jason or Jigisha, Bill, if you're here, do you mind adding some stuff about the releases? I'll also still talk about them right now, but if you can add them to the work group, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Um,
I can add it.
Thanks. So we have some patch releases that we released today. It includes a fix for some PV topology stuff. This is particularly useful, I believe, with Kafka users. Um, I'm not sure if Jonathan's here today, but if you want more information about it, you can. Oh, that's not the right thing. How do I don't know how to maximize it again. Oh, dual screen. Cool. Yeah, if you have more you want to learn about it, there's this pull request here that's talked about in this one. So it's for, oh yes, it's for local persistent volumes. I won't get into much into it, but if you're curious about it, you can go and read the release notes. Besides that, we did version 35.1, version 34 last week. So for some bug fixes, and we also did this, I believe, in the AWS version. Yeah, so mostly a bunch of patch releases. Trying to get in some bug fixes that we have. Um, and there's a bug that we had with volume size, cube reserved, and system reserved. So our hashing mechanism for our AWS node, or sorry, our EC2 node classes and our node pools were a little bit off. I mean, are you here? It's not here. Okay. Um, basically the problem was that the V1 resource lists, the API, we didn't actually hash the data inside the resource list. And so whenever you had that changed, it wouldn't actually trigger drift. And so some people saw that have a little bit of a different calculation when it came to their allocated and capacity values for their pods. But yeah, so those are our releases. Any questions? Now I'll continue to the community questions, which is where the other questions are. All right. Garvin, you want to talk about this?
Sure. I think this is a pretty big and broad issue, so I just want to bring up and see where we are at because I think there's many problems with custom resources, and I just want to see because we have some, not like huge, but like some urgency regarding huge pages, but then it does seem like it's slightly different than some of the other custom resource requirements. I just want to see like where the working groups at in terms of like some kind of high level design or soft or something like that along those lines to see where we are at. Yeah.
Yeah, is it specifically huge pages that you want, and then you're thinking because you would get custom resources implemented and that would help huge pages, or is there other custom resources that you want?
It's specific to huge pages and some manipulation of existing resources just because of how memory, I guess huge pages carved out of memory. So like essentially having a simple override that allows us to either add huge pages, then override memory by instance type per node class would be flexible enough for us to mess around. Um, and I guess
I
from
see.
my point of view, is like in a way, it's a good starting point just because they put the onus on the user to have these overrides just for themselves. In the case that Karpenter supports any better ways to do like other type of customers like Fuse or whatever, that the original issue was from Fuse, which I honestly am not familiar with. But then like then the Carpenter can do something around like having config maps that they can release
Mhm.
that's based on what AWS supports in instance types. It just at a very high level some sort of override, maybe config map, what I'm saying, but then it doesn't have to be. That's per instance type allows us to like mess around some of these things. I think for some users, I don't remember what the issue was, like the issue number, but there was an issue around GPUs and time sharing GPUs and how because the decrements that you wanted to be able to ignore certain resources. So the override may be able to do something like that. Just floating some ideas.
GPUs, network bandwidth, network
Right.
condition. There's a lot of things that would be awesome to have.
Yeah. I
And I don't
think
think that those things necessarily need to have like a config map override. Like a lot of this stuff I think can just be gotten from the EC2 like metadata, right?
yeah, it does seem like looking at the code, I forgot where I linked the code, but then like it does a very simple like get of the information that an instance have and then map that into resources.
Yep.
Expanding that might help for
So
certain users, but yeah.
I see. You'd be talking about configuring the mapping in the config map, not like saying if it's this instance type, set it to this. Yeah.
Yeah,
One of
Yeah. Okay.
one other thing is also the EBS volumes, I guess. There's no way to tell like M16 gets a different disk size versus M4 gets a different size. Like that sort of thing is very hard to do. Like huge pages is something you could probably manipulate inside Linux to understand. Like you can do it probably in user data for now, short term. But for the disk size, it's for now, I guess it's people are configuring very high disks in order to compensate for all of the different variations. Um, that would be something that comes into same bucket as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you can all see that the the issue was created like
Yeah.
2 years ago. So this is definitely a problem that we've heard a lot. And I know that Jonathan even tackled it like when he first joined the team about like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. And I think there's a lot of trade-offs to like you can do the config map approach. I don't actually remember all the different details that we had, but this is something that we've definitely heard for a while, and it's not something that they're saying that we won't do, but it's a pretty large and vague problem of how to generally do it. And at least a config map where you can specify like specific instance type overrides if you have them. I know it would help out a lot of people just because I know that some people have a smaller subset of instance types that they care about. Um, yeah.
yeah, it does seem like there's many variation of the same, like they all wrapped under custom resource, unfortunately, but they're all like variations of it. I'm like happy to try to slice off some parts through config map, but then I'm not completely sure if that's a good partial solution. I just don't know where all the pieces fit together and where you guys think it should go before we get started, because I don't want to drive in a direction that then end up not working for in general, like at all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think
Wanna-
if you're interested in writing like an RFC or something about this to get it in, I'd recommend talking about specifically what resources you care about and how you'd like to override them, whether it's just like over instance family or if it's instance size or instance type. I think that'd be a good place to start and have that discussion because I know that this, at least from this issue, I don't know where I would start reading to get the up to date on this.
Can I point out one more thing? If you scroll back to this override that we have per instance type in the config map, it looks like we're starting to develop kind of a list of things that we may want to specify per instance type. We talked about like custom pricing, right? There were some discussions about potential like max delay during provisioning. It would be good to compile the list of those and see if we're getting closer and closer to, I don't know if it's another custom resource that's per instance type overrides or something else, but it seems like we have a list of those.
It's like instance type property override or something along those lines.
Yep.
Where I've heard the pricing. I've also have similar issue in terms of pricing. So like I can see why you may want to include like weights or something. But yeah, I can take a quick look and see like Chrome for the issue, trying to find the other ones. But yeah.
To
Yeah,
give
I
you
know
another
John-
example that we ran into recently, like the delay, the maximum allowed delay for provisioning, it's right now hard-coded in Karpenter core, but we know that like GPU nodes oftentimes take longer than others. And I don't know if it's a
There's
good
an issue.
example. Yeah, it's a little bit more of an internal thing, but yeah, it just sounds like we have a list of potential candidates for this.
You said the maximum delay for GPU provisioning?
Registration TTL.
Yep.
Okay.
Registration.
Okay.
That's
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd recommend, I know you've probably already done this, but I'd recommend reaching out to Jonathan. And he can definitely help you along with any of the RFC stuff that you need.
Sure, I can take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, reach out.
Yeah, I know you've already opened RFC, so I know you're no stranger to it. All right. Matt, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. All right. So a thing we're noticing as we roll out Karpenter on like one of our bigger clusters and like our testing environments, so the cluster used to run like 100 nodes and now runs 600 nodes. And I'm having a hard time believing that that's less cost effective or more cost effective, sorry, just due to like the daemon sets that we're running on these nodes. In the past, we've skewed toward higher, like larger instance types for that reason. So I guess my question is this like a known issue or is this something like that needs to be explored more and just kind of understood better about like why it might be happening? Is kind of question number one. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to, go with the other questions? You want to tackle them one at a time?
Let's do one at a time.
The first one I had on this is there any like deployment or like pod scheduling requirements that you have that might be like, I don't know, TSC or preferred TSC or anti-affinity that might have been different?
So we have some only soft affinities typically. We're pretty aggressive about keeping scheduling open. The only things that we really have are architecture selectors right now for like AMD64 while we're working on building like multi-arch compatible images for ARM and whatnot. So that's really like the biggest thing. So.
It's just preferred.
Yeah, we do have like soft
affinities.
affinities on anti-scheduling on the same node, for example, but it's only soft. So my understanding is that Karpenter doesn't care.
It does. It's
for soft affinity?
Oh, affinity.
Yeah. Yeah, for preferred scheduling affinities, not for required.
Because okay, if a while back I have similar issue, but I don't know about affinities, but topology constraint it's tightens soft topology into strict. So it won't consolidate if you are, say, let's say on nodes, like if you have soft prefer, it won't consolidate multiple nodes. Because, so let's say you want 3 AZ, like you have soft topology on easy. It will spin up 3 and never bring down the 3.
Right.
There's soft
I don't,
Wait, so for soft topology constraints, it impacts its consolidation and scheduling?
Yes.
Yeah, we
What?
won't consolidate if it violates preferences.
So
Yeah.
like, there's so I brought this issue a while back in one of the working group sessions. Essentially,
Yeah,
what has happened is we have soft topology constraint on node, like on domain of nodes.
Yeah.
That essentially mean every single pod that went to pending and unschedulable create a new node, and each node is a metal node.
Yep.
And it doesn't consolidate because of this timing. We migrated. So one solve we had was migrate the topology constraint out of the pod spec and into the scheduler config. That way,
Jesus
Karpenter
Christ.
doesn't know about it.
Oh my God.
There's an issue for this.
Yeah, okay,
Nodes.
yeah, okay. Is this being considered for V1?
Let me see what is on here. It doesn't have a V1 on here, but
Okay,
As far as I know, it's not actively being considered for V1 because it is a pretty tough problem to solve because
well,
if
so
we
the way this
want it
historically
at
works,
scale up and not at scale down,
Right.
you have constant pod churn and node churn. But if you don't respect it, you might not spread at all.
well, the way this worked historically with cluster autoscaler is that anything that was a soft constraint did not matter for cluster autoscaler's teardown or for it like starting new nodes. So the community, I think, has some amount of just innate knowledge of like that's how it works. Anything that's hard impacts scheduling. Anything that's soft is just whatever nodes are available. Like it does the best it can in the moment. So I don't know if it's worth trying to maintain that kind of a paradigm rather than trying to change it.
Yeah, I
But-
think we'd definitely like to hear feedback on the preferences mega issue.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess previously I was like, I wanted us to respect, prefer, and not restricting it. I think I see why. Like I understand why, but then I think previously brought up the point was that even though Karpenter respects it, the scheduler does not. So first node will win and end up picking up a majority of pods, and we end up churning a lot of nodes.
Yep.
If there's some way, I understand this is partially a Kubernetes issue because in a way, the scheduling constraints isn't what is telling you what nodes you need necessarily. Like it doesn't fully tell you you need more nodes. It's just telling there's a constraint that it's during scheduling. And there's nothing in between to tell it, actually, I do need more nodes in a different AZ to signal that to Karpenter or the autoscaler to do that. And I get why Karpenter might not have gone that direction. It's just like, yeah, coming from cluster autoscale, it's slightly jarring to see that.
Yeah, that's very jarring. Also, it's I would also state that like pod churn is a symptom of a different problem as opposed to like we shouldn't like avoid or node churn to like yeah, it's like we're conflating different issues. So I think having like better disruption controls and limits around how frequently churn occurs would be a better response to the node churn problem than saying, okay, we're going to just not tear down nodes because of soft affinities. Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
No, I was just going to add on, it feels this is more like a disruption query than a scheduling query, because if it creates, like you mentioned, the 600 small, my expectations would be that it compiles them, it consolidates them into larger instances based on those affinities. Completely understanding the scheduler can't tell you that it needs more nodes in certain areas, as we just discussed, but more towards that disruption side, I think would be some benefits there.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit more color, I guess. When we had this issue, even after we changed it, we still continue to see inability of Karpenter to consolidate up to a larger instance type. And from what I've seen, I think there's two core issues. I think the one is first, it's not necessarily an issue, but then it's core behavior as a Karpenter where scheduling is fast and it doesn't do very intelligent like reconfiguration. It's like, what node do I need to satisfy this? And for most cluster, any given time, the node that is needed to satisfy is small. So there's a bias here towards
Exactly.
non-scheduling. Yeah.
Yeah, that part makes sense to me.
Right. And then
Yeah.
the second part is that it seems that Karpenter is overly, well, it try to be safe. So consolidation happens slower and easily disruptible, and to the point that it doesn't disrupt. So from what I've seen, if your cluster is relatively unstable in that like there's a lot of pod churn and movement and scaling up and down,
It's
you
never gonna shrink down.
shrink down and up or whatever, like it
Yeah.
doesn't consolidate well and doesn't bring in the larger node size because either
Yep.
the disruption cost is too high or like it didn't feel safe to move on. So like
Okay.
we end up banning smaller instances because it just failed to consolidate to the higher ones.
Yeah, that's also like the direction I'm starting to move, but at the same time, it's a problem because certain
Yeah.
architectures don't have the same instance sizes available,
Exactly.
which makes it more complicated, and then we have to split up instance sizes by node pool, and that's awful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
But
there
this
is
is
like
super helpful.
yeah, I'm glad it's a little more helpful on that. There's there's like a consolidate after issue, which I think is maybe the most voted up issue. This is the one that would help you tune how aggressive Carpenter is going to be for your specific case carbon. I know that for sometimes with like especially AWS instance types, you can go from you can look at a C6A.2x large and a C6A.4x large, and it's exactly twice as expensive. So whenever it gets to those twice as expensive stuff, if it pops the same way, and you don't have something that fills into the gaps of the overhead, it doesn't it's not actually a cheaper thing for you. It may be cheaper in terms of like it's like slight less utilization, but in terms of what Carpenter is seeing, it's a little bit it
Yep.
doesn't really help at all.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I just wish there's some way to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
having metrics that prove that would also be super
Yeah.
helpful, which I think that
Like-
we might already. I need to go dig more, but yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
if Carpenter's like, I'm not gonna do this because it didn't actually cost better. Like having that would be great because it took a lot of digging to see like the pattern, but then it's still not obvious why Carpenter decides certain things.
This is something that we want to invest in also before V1 is just better understandings of what's happening in the consolidation algorithm. I know like the kind of whole set of Kubernetes constraints are just just so much to understand. And it's really hard to get like a one super parsable answer about why one node was disrupted and why the pods can't schedule on those nodes. That would be like easier to parse. But anything like feedback of like, oh, I saw this consolidation thing happened. I wanted more information on this specific part of the consolidation command would be good for understanding on our side of like what observability things we need to add into this algorithm.
Yeah, I have an issue around some suggestions that I have regarding logging and metrics for Carpenter for V1. Mainly like clearing up some of the log statements or like even having the log statement be consistent in its what fields it has, and then also maybe emitting events for decision made around like a node or something like that. I think I call it Carpenter metric or log suggestions, but then it's very hard. So I get why certain things are done the current way, but I think as an operator, I don't want to turn on debug mode to understand. I want like I guess debug mode, it makes sense for me to see like per controller logs, because like oftentimes I will see like, okay, the deprovisioning controller has issue deprovisioning a node, even though it is really because the node failed to provision in the first place. Like that's very confusing. And I think it makes sense that the log shows up maybe in a debug level, but then there needs to be an info level log that doesn't care about what controller. It just tells you this node didn't build or didn't come up, and that's it. Like I don't want you to tell me this controller failed because this controller also failed. Like there's already too many controllers, and if I see something fail in the deprovisioning controller, I would think something in the deprovisioning failed. And it's not caused by because the node was never provisioned in the first place, if that makes sense. So like being able to, I guess, unify the log so that like it failed to provision, good enough at like a higher level, and some way to like surface that and not have it like every controller is gonna fail on something because something at the very beginning failed, if that makes sense. Amongst other things, I think being able to tell you like a pod is not fitting in any of the no pools, that log statement iterate through all the no pools. And I was like, I don't need all this, or like I need a way to
Mhm.
structure that so I can actually parse this, because it just dumps you all of it. And I'm like, I don't know how to read this.
This is definitely a big problem of
Yeah.
just like it's a hard problem.
Yeah, for
Because you
sure.
want to be able to give all the logs possible and
Right.
then have that structured in a way so that anyone's log aggregator or parser can get the
Right.
information that they want. I know we've also taken the stance that we only want to do like info and debug because we don't want to get ourselves into like a what's a log verbosity 7 mean or what's a log verbosity 9 mean.
For sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think
so
Jonathan shared a good article or like reference to this in one of the issues replacing the Knative logging, where it's like you have info and then debug and then everything else is like trace. Like I don't really care about it. Like we don't think too much. Did you see that PR? I can share the direct link to what I'm referencing. One sec.
yeah, it'd be good to get the link.
But that's like a deeper conversation of like how much do we want the logs to yell and what values? Maybe there needs to be some audit. Like we care more about these values being verbose. Let's see.
Yeah, and also part of it is just if we get better understanding of what logs need to occur that aren't occurring, that's enough in some people's cases of like I can just ignore all these useless logs that are in this other controller that I don't care about. And I can just,
Yeah,
as long as I have the ones that I care about, then we're good to go.
or even just reducing the noise of some of them. Like for example, cluster state. Like it's the reason why I don't want to turn on debug level logs is because half the logs will then become like is cluster synced, right?
Uh,
So
yeah,
it's
that's a tough one too, because you don't want, it's like you want
you
to be
want to
able to
know
see
that
that in
info.
the
Yeah, yeah,
logs, but it's like you can't dedupe in the logs. So if you put it in the events, then people might not be able to see it.
yeah. It's a trade-off game,
Yeah.
like everything. Okay, I found the link. I'll share it in the chat.
Yeah, definitely we'll get some more work on this observability stuff. This is also a big thing for V1 for us as well. All right. All right, Matt, you have another question?
Part
I have the
2.
next like 6 questions.
Yeah. So while also looking at the large instances stuff, we're realizing that we care more about daemon sets in particular because some of our daemon sets have license fees attached to them that are on a per node basis. And that is something that Karpenter does not take into account when it's determining should we make this size instance versus that size instance. And I guess my question is there any kind of anything in the Fleet API that would support that kind of a use case to just have like an extra arbitrary amount of it costs this much extra overhead to run this node?
Just like you change your linear equation to add a bigger plus b or something like that.
Yep. I just want to say that like every extra node we cost is a five extra dollars just for whatever reason, which could include like license fees, etc.
Yeah, that'd be nice to have if you have the custom pricing bit. I'm sure that's one way you could do it. I think is this Datadog?
No, this has nothing to do with data. Yes, Datadog's one of them. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I
But this
remember.
can also be like security scanning software. There's a number of things that I'm sure people are running on their stuff that incorporate or incurs extra fees.
Yeah, there's also another bit here of our daemon set selection logic with our batching is a little bit off. And so if you have daemon sets that have node selectors that try and select different sets of instance sizes so that they can fit better, we'll actually just group all the daemon sets together in provisioning and batching. And so we'll often overshoot.
Okay.
That's honestly one way you might be able to arbitrarily do it if you wanted to, is like make I haven't thought about this
Oh,
off the top of my head, is you make an arbitrary daemon set that has some requests
I
it
see.
gets pulled into and maybe gets negatively, like gets preempted out.
Yeah, but then that's gonna screw with everything because it's just gonna try to be. I don't know. That's an interesting idea. I also wonder
Yeah.
if there's some way to hook this into Karpenter, like whenever it's passing the information about what needs to be scheduled off of the Fleet API, to exaggerate that potentially, or something. I don't know. That probably is not the right direction to handle this, but
Mhm.
yeah,
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 I
I
don't.
agree with that journey. Yeah. But I'll see what's I'll probably ask our AWS rep to see if they know who to talk to about this,
Yeah.
to see if this is like on somebody's roadmap somewhere or what. So
Yeah, I think let me find the daemon set issue too. I think the daemon
yeah.
set issue is also a V1 thing. Yeah, let's see what next. Yeah, so there's this one which talks about how daemon sets don't get properly packed, or they don't get properly included in provisioning calculations. And then there is this one, which is that new daemon sets don't trigger consolidation, or they don't create new nodes.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, new daemon sets. Oh, wait, huh? I mean, daemon sets should never create nodes, would be my understanding, but
Yeah, that's
I think they're talking about if you daemon sets as a higher priority, then it
oh,
would preempt your actual workload.
and then
That
those
is
workloads don't
apps.
get scheduled.
Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
mean
but
they get scheduled somewhere else, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's an advanced problem. Like managing
Yeah.
that better, I think. But it also should sort itself out eventually through consolidation, I would expect. You add a new daemon set, it spreads your stuff out across multiple smaller nodes, and then it sees that multiple big nodes or fewer bigger nodes is better. Hmm. Okay, yeah, that's a good thing. I haven't read the entire fact. There's a lot of good info in there. Cool. I think that's all I have for there. I'll follow up on the AWS side to see what they
Okay.
think.
do you have more? Are these also some questions as well?
Uh, yeah, but give someone else a turn.
Good idea. All right, Robin.
Yep, this was mentioned previously in the status update, so this could be a very quick question. Thank you for updating that Datadog integration. I'm just curious because the version 3.2 to 3.3 removed a metric which didn't have a clean replacement. There was a provisioner node usage percentage, I believe it was, which didn't get replaced with. So the impact with Grafana dashboards, with Datadog and alerting is when there is that kind of removal of a metric and there's no easy replacement, those appear as blank dashboards for new users starting with Karpenter. And my view is that with people trying to get more observability, I'm an SRE in life, so observability is my life. Having blank metrics on the standard dashboard becomes a concern, therefore needs adjusting. I was curious, moving forwards, and completely agreeing with the previous comment that as maintainers, you shouldn't need to worry about Datadog as a vendor, ensuring that they're keeping their metrics up to date, but kind of like what a process or what it would look like that if there is metric removals or metric additions, how do we ensure that they get updated or the awareness is made that they've been updated to dashboards?
Yeah, so the V32 and V33 migration for V1 Beta 1 was a pretty big one. I don't know exactly if we removed a metric and there wasn't an equivalent metric for it in the node pool versions, because I think what you said was a provisioner percent usage. That was it. Was it this one?
It's linked in the notes. It was the usage node. Is that the one, the PCT?
Yes.
Yeah.
Build by node. Yeah, it doesn't has the PCT, and then the provisioner one had the PCT.
Yeah, the Karpenter provisioner usage PCT was the example, because that was apparent on the Datadog dashboards, which turned out to be blank metrics when installed 0.35.
Yeah, let's see. I see. Interesting. I wonder, is it Is it not possible to do some sort of usage divided by a limit in your aggregation?
It is, especially using those toolings. It's more for, I'm using Datadog as a specific example because that's what I've been using. You install the integration and the dashboard appears automatically, and the dashboard JSON contains the metric for the usage PCT, and you can't modify that because it's coming as part of an integration. Now, if there was a equivalent metric, there's configuration you can make onto the integration on Datadog to say, use this metric instead, because these are in parallel with each other or are symmetric to each other. But in regards to when a metric's removed and there's no replacement, it just appears as a black metric if the dashboards don't get updated with new metrics.
So if you had let's say we had a metric and we changed the name of it, would you be able to do some like post transformation on that?
I believe so on the Datadog side, yes. I can't comment on the Grafana side though.
Okay, so you could move the reference of one metric to another. But you can't necessarily do like computation or like transformation logic onto other metrics to get the same one?
Also kind of an idea of like, that's a performance side too, for doing those extra computations. It'd be better to just update the plumbing correctly or to do the simpler thing.
Yeah, I think we had a similar kind of, actually, I just remembered that we were talking about this in terms of what status conditions or like what printer columns we want to have in the node pool. And I think we were discussing of having the percent usage in there. And previously you could have just like you could have the usage and you can have the limits. And they have like, and you can construct the percentage usage from there. But there's also the point that there's different units within these usages and limits that doing that conversion and computation yourself is a little bit harder than the convenience you get from like those printer columns and maybe is here as well.
Okay, so as and when metrics change or for the future releases, there are going to be, if there are removals of metrics and there's no easy replacement, where's the best place to get the insights for that one? So, for example, my dashboards I've created, I can update to use the new metrics before I then perform the upgrade.
So we should, I don't know when the last time we broke a metric or like removed a metric was. Anytime that we have some like a breaking change, which is changing the metric name, changing a metric label name, we always include it into the upgrade guide. If we missed something, it'd be great to know so that we can put these in our upgrade guide notes. But in terms of like the Kubernetes version, sorry, the Karpenter version boundary is when new, if any, breaking changes would be introduced. But it sounds like you have a path to doing transformation between versions if the previous metric exists.
Yep, and then that can then be sent upstream to Datadog in this case to have their dashboards. And it's very similar to what Mike did previously with his update on Datadog's integration. Okay, no, that's great. So yeah, I think there may be a follow-up, but I can take that one later for updating the dashboards, default dashboard for the Datadog integration, but it doesn't feel like that's relevant to the working group, unless anyone objects to that one.
Yeah, on the provision or usage percent, I know we removed it with an opinion that this could be done on whatever the data processing side, but if you want to open an issue so that we can discuss it more in depth there to see like and evaluate the convenience use case versus what we need to do as Karpenter, I think it's reasonable.
Yep, no, that's fine. I'm happy to do the aggregation or the calculation on the Datadog as an example, but it's more right now the default template for that shows the blank screen, blank metric. There's actually quite a few because the dashboard was created back in that 3.2 with all those breaking change upgrades, and so it just requires someone to update the default dashboard. But if it is classified as breaking changes and it is something that's made aware, then it's something that we can keep an eye on and upgrade to the vendors as required.
Yeah, definitely. I think the version 32 to version 33 was the biggest set of breaking changes that we had because it was just the different APIs as well. So all the naming and everything changed too.
Perfect. That answers my question. Thank you very much.
All right, Alex,
Yeah, this is a little bit of kind of provider-specific question, but I was curious if anybody has good ideas. So in AKS, some of the node labels are quote unquote protected, meaning that an arbitrary component cannot just apply it, it will fail. So we ran into this originally when having Karpenter apply the zone label. And the temporary workaround, which actually works pretty good, was just apply a different label or not apply it at all, because there is a different component in AKS which will apply this label with proper zone. It mostly works in most cases. Where it starts to break down is when somebody includes zone in the requirements. So this will cause a continuous drift because the requirements will include this zone, not claim one. I can think of a couple of different solutions to this, including forcing AKS to accept this label when it comes from Karpenter. But I'm curious if anybody else, have any other thoughts on how one could handle this.
So are you saying that the AKS control plane is denying the use of someone setting these zones?
Yep, exactly. If anybody tries just to apply the zone label, that will be a failure, and that's what happens when Karpenter tries to do it after the node claim gets created. And at the same time, there's a different component of the control plane which will apply this label with the correct zone. So it's almost as if, kind of if I try to generalize it, it's almost like the provider would want to tell the Karpenter core that of those labels with node claim, subset is expected to appear on node, but don't bother applying CSL. Something like, I don't know, like I don't want to call it like startup labels rather than startup tags.
Yeah, I guess specifically for the label case, I don't know if oh, wait, it's in the requirements case, never mind. I was gonna say that the labels, it shouldn't be drifted just because we use the hash of all the static information, but you're right that the requirements will change something here.
I mean, luckily, it's a rare case when people need to specify a requirement like zone requirements, but I think there's still some use cases. So I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on this.
I mean, you could add that, something that we do is in the AWS part is that we add a set of well-known labels. I think like on installation, I think maybe you could decide to reject or remove this label from like well-known labels that people can specify and add it into the prohibited labels.
So that means that people wouldn't be able to specify requirements based on zone. I mean, we can definitely protect from that, and that would be already a step forward so that people don't shoot themselves in the foot. But I'm trying to see if there's a good solution for still supporting zone-based requirements, like without having Karpenter apply the label. If there is no nice ways, or if like we don't expect any other providers to potentially run into this, we could probably find a way to let Karpenter apply those labels. But I was curious about potential solutions.
Yeah, I wonder if everyone who's using zones, if it's like a user's like, I only want zone A and zone B, but there's also zone C and zone D, and then they use any like a zonal requirements on their pods. I think that's the only case I could see, but I'm not sure. What are some use cases for not wanting specific zones? Like, I think that's the only case I would think of. It's like if you want a specific zone, that means you don't want the other zones, right?
Right. So in most cases, I think you're right. We should just point users towards specifying any kind of zone constraints or topology spread in the workloads, right? And just avoid specifying the requirements. But yeah, I'll have to think through use cases. But generally, in Karpenter, you can specify a requirement based on zone, right? That's something that's supported. Are you saying that you haven't seen any good use cases for that?
I'm not saying that I haven't, or I haven't seen good use cases because I haven't dived into the details of it. But I'm sure that there's probably a set of use cases that I'm missing here because I just started thinking about it just now.
Anyway, I'll also create an issue on this like in our provider repo, and if anybody has any thoughts, please speak up. Yeah, we don't have to solve it right now. I was just curious.
Great. All right. I'll go Venkat. I know you're talking about the disruption termination grace period.
Yeah, it's been there for a while. It's I was wondering when that would come in. This is essentially we kind of run a very mixed workload on a very large clusters, and some teams do have bad PDBs and stuff, and so the Karpenter gets blocked on this, and so wondering if that comes along. So generally today, or the way we handle it, like we have a 3-hour grace period, then like if you don't handle it, you don't handle it. Like 3 hours after the node is gone, right? So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
take a fresh look at the current comments. I think we were getting down to like some of the minutia, but also talking about kind of re-implementing a couple of the how some of the logic works. So
okay,
I've been pretty slammed this past week, but Carpenter is my life at the moment, so
okay,
definitely eager to get back into this.
okay.
But I will say, even if this gets merged and released, you are still going to run into the other issue, which is that Karpenter doesn't even consider consolidating nodes that have PDBs that are blocked. So this is not the only piece of the puzzle that you need in order to solve your problem.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. So
Yep. This is also something that we need to consider as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I need to think about if we're going to do this V1 or V1X, meaning like as a fast follow V1. But this is definitely something that we've heard a lot, especially at the cron job case where do not disrupt pods, just keep scheduling and you never get that pod expired or drifted.
Yep. Yeah, I've been mucking around a lot, like patching the current like reconciliation loops and stuff to get more familiar with how this is actually working. We could do some kind of like disruption queue where things that are not actually like excluded from being considered for disruption and then but are kicked back in the queue if they're still not ready yet, kind of thing. And yeah, that's kind of like where I'm getting at just with my fingers.
Yeah, we have done it in a way that in the past we put an annotation if there's a timestamp on when we tried last time, saying, hey, do not consider that node for now, just move on with other nodes, and then come back to it at the end, same kind of thing.
Yeah, you could also do something that just forcibly punts abusive pods just to work around it. But yeah, I do agree that this really should be supported in Karpenter proper. So
there's another set of ways you can implement this as well, and that you could decide to taint nodes that are expired or drifted. Something that Jason's trying to work on. I know you've talked about this too, Matt. Or is that so that those pods don't reschedule, and that you also can have a do not disrupt grace period as well, so that this grace period expires after a certain amount of time after its creation, which is kind of like a minimum age for an application or a node. And there's also this thing right here, which is the custom trigger mechanism, where it could be something that you natively plug into, whether that's like a taint, it's a annotation, and then Karpenter could respect that as part of the disruption controller. It doesn't necessarily, I guess it depends on the implementation here of if it's a different mechanism of forcefulness, but this is maybe another way that we could handle it as well.
Can you guys also point me to the other issue that you were talking about, where if the PDBs are blocking where you won't even drain? Is there an issue around it? And this is general expected behavior today.
That's the other question I had is has a link to it.
Okay.
That TTL has a good summary of the problem. The TTL issue, this one, yeah.
Oh, this one, okay.
Because really they're trying to solve the same kind of problem, which is just
problem,
yeah.
That's fair.
But really the issue is just that Karpenter, when it's going through its candidate building list for what needs to be disrupted, it just straight up excludes things that cannot be evicted by the eviction API, which is anything with a failing PDB. So
Okay, makes sense.
they'll never even be attempted to be
Consider-
deleted.
Yeah, then we won't even get to the graceful termination and all of that.
Yep.
This is useless.
Your termination grace period will never matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's no.
You can do
Okay.
something if you really want it now. You could watch for expired nodes that you think have been expired too long and kubectl delete them, and that'll do that
Yeah.
graceful German for you.
Yeah, so we do have our own implementation of the node rotation. Maybe we probably just depend on that for short term, like where we rotate like percentage of nodes. We implemented this for other reasons, but yeah, maybe we'll just depend on it for short term. If this is
All right. Yeah.
On that
Oh, sorry.
topic, what's like the best way to approach these kinds of hard to reason about topics? Is it just kind of like trying to coalesce a bunch of thoughts together and then put it into a proposal of some kind and then wiggle that back and forth for a while? Or
Like
would it
specifically
be
about
better
like
to set up a meeting? Or,
how to solve this problem?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're thinking about a lot. We could do a bit better about once we have like a halfway or like a 20% of our thought, like maybe post that in discussions and continue to have our discussions there.
Mhm.
If this is something that's like really important to you, and like even if you just start like an RFC that has just like, I don't know, 3 lines in it, I'm sure the discussion will start going from there, and that we can evolve and work on the RFC together.
Sure. That sounds
Is
reasonable.
I can add, like Nick mentioned earlier, I'm working on I'm working on putting together an RFC for coordinating for expiration and drift, and it will touch on this, even though I don't think it will totally solve the problem.
Mhm.
But we can maybe have some discussion there as well once that gets up.
Great, thanks, Jason. All right, I think the remainder of the questions are all you, Matt. If you want to use the remainder 6 minutes for whatever questions you got.
I just passed my last one. It was
really?
basically like, this is a hard problem. What's the best way to start approaching it? Yeah.
Great.
Which
Gotcha.
yeah, I think a light RFC is not a bad option. So.
All right, there's no more questions then. Is there anyone else who hasn't written it down and wants to talk about something still? Going once, going twice. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for coming. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.